Alright, let's give this a second shot. Sorry again to both Dithyram and Sean, who I think were the only two on the stream previously. When they jump on to this stream, hopefully they're still around. I will apologise to them again. We have been having tech issues, so we haven't been able to play Fire Emblem. I'm going to have to figure out what's going on with that, because I'm very disappointed if I won't be able to push on with the Fire Emblem playthrough. But in desperation, I grabbed the nearest game that I can definitely play. And that's Final Fantasy VIII Remastered, as in the one that released it on the Switch not too long ago actually, about a year ago I think. I think it came and went and people remembered that it was a bit of a classic, but quickly forgot about it again because there were so many other games to play. But Final Fantasy VIII is one of my favourite games of all time. I really love this game, even within the context of the Final Fantasy series. So, yeah, I guess it's an excuse to play it through again, and that's just fine. That's just fine. Alright, let's welcome back Sean. I hope that everything's clear now. You're able to see the footage that we're about to get going with. The screen showing up nice and easy for you. Seems to be okay for me right at this moment. Hopefully it stays that way. Let's jump into it. So Final Fantasy VIII was, believe it or not, the first Final Fantasy that I remember buying for myself. I played some of the other Final Fantasy games through less than legitimate means because they weren't really available in Australia. And I also had played a couple of other ones, including Final Fantasy VII with at friends' places. But I never had a PlayStation 1, so I didn't get around to playing this until the PlayStation 2 came out, and I bought a copy of it just late, early on when I got my PlayStation 2, and really loved it. I really love this game. It's a special one, and I'm glad that Square Enix was able to find it again and re-release it, because as the story goes, that everybody knows quite well, Final Fantasy VIII was essentially lost. They couldn't find any of the source code and weren't able to re-release it like they had done with all of the other Final Fantasy games in the many different consoles that they're available on. Final Fantasy VIII was kind of languishing there, not re-released, and that had changed thanks to .emu last year or the year before. They released it on PlayStation and Switch and all the other consoles, and it was very readily available again. It's quite a good quality port that they've done too. It's a good one. It's a good one. So hopefully you can all hear me. I'm just going to put my own sound on just for a second, just to make sure that I can hear myself. So you'll hear a bit of an echo for a second, but now I'm all paranoid about the technology mucking up on me. So good, I can hear myself. Excellent. So that means you must be able to hear me, which gives you no excuse not to say things. So now, with all of that introduction done with, hello Sean, welcome back. And yes, Zell is good, but I think you can guess which is my favourite character in Final Fantasy VIII, if you didn't already know. Exactly, they did a really good job. This is not the perfect version of Final Fantasy VIII. It's not quite the version that a lot of people remember, because it is based on the PC version, which was not as good, but this is very playable. It tells the story, which is the main thing, and it was it's restored it. It's preserved the game for future generations. Hopefully they keep releasing it well into the future. And yes, the Selphie is by far my favourite. She was my first waifu, actually, way back when, you know, before that, games didn't really have character models that you could enjoy. Selphie was my first waifu. Mind you, I did only just play Final Fantasy VIII just before Final Fantasy X, and once Final Fantasy X came out, Riku kind of took over, and Riku was really my very favourite female character for the longest time. So yeah, Square Enix definitely had a thing for it way back when. I guess they still do, but they don't really indulge it quite as much these days. So anyway, once we get through all of this, there is a really lovely cutscene, Fmv cutscene, to kick things off. And oldies amongst us will remember that back in these days, realistic graphics were not really a thing. The only way they got a sense of realism into these games was to have these kind of really highly produced FMVs, which were full motion video things, and they were very distinct from the actual in-game graphics. They had different character models because they were rendered at a much higher resolution than the game could actually render. So you used to watch those in a similar way you watch the kind of anime intros for a lot of low-budget JRPGs these days. You watch those little intros as a way of getting a sense of character and world, and then you put what you know of that into what you're seeing when you're actually playing the game. So these FMV clips, of which you'll see one very soon, are really the way of interacting with the world at the start. What I didn't know, and I found this absolutely fascinating, was that I actually motion captured a lot of this stuff. So I don't think we'll probably definitely not get up to it tonight, but there's a full dance scene in Final Fantasy VIII, which is really nicely choreographed. And I always just thought that it was computer animated. I just assumed that. But no, that was actually motion captured dancing, and a couple of years ago I saw this Twitter video of the motion capture session. For whatever reason, they'd archived that better than the game, and it was really lovely, and I didn't realise that motion capture was a thing that far back. Well, Miku didn't exist back when these games were there, you know, so Miku kind of replaced all of them once she arrived on the scene. Welcome back, DT Round, and if you missed my apology, my grovelling apology at the start of the stream, I'm very sorry about those technical issues I had before. I'm gonna have to delete that video off my YouTube, because otherwise that's a pretty embarrassing attempt at a stream. But hopefully this one will get us through tonight, and I'll try to fix whatever that issue is so we can get back to Fire Emblem next week. Or if we're enjoying this one, we'll keep playing through this one. Who knows? Who knows how these things will work? Ah, the infamous Gunblade. This is back in those days. Square loved to just be absolutely nonsense and just play with it. Final Fantasy series, I do enjoy the modern Final Fantasy games, Final Fantasy 15 and 13. I do enjoy those, but Square Enix has got oh so serious about this stuff. Back with Final Fantasy 8, it had gunblades. Final Fantasy 7 had houses that attacked you. And one of the reasons I like Final Fantasy VII Remake that much was because it played with the nonsense that these games used to have. So while there's an underlying seriousness about what these games did and the stories they told, they certainly had plenty of, you know, fun nonsense in there as well, which is a spirit that I think is lacking from the Final Fantasy series now. It would be nice to see Final Fantasy 16, which we all know is coming at some point, just be a return to this in some way. I don't know if they'll actually do that, but it would be lovely to see Square Enix really go back to its roots with its actual Final Fantasy series. I think... I suspect that they don't think there's money in doing that anymore, but I think they'd be surprised about just how many fans they'd be able to pull out of the woodwork to give it another go. So in this opening cutscene, we see Squall get a bit of a cut. Actually improves him a bit, actually. He definitely wears the scar nicely. He's a bit of a bad boy, is our Squall. A bit grim too, but he comes out of his out of the woodwork eventually. He you know, comes out of his shell. That's what the word I'm looking for. He comes out of his shell eventually, but it takes him a while to get there, and until then, he manages to out-annoy Cloud. But he's still better than Vaan. No one likes Vaan. Okay, so now we finally have control of the action, and we get to make a decision which isn't really going to affect anything, because this is not a visual novel, and narrative decisions don't branch off in different directions. But let's go with the forehead hurts. Let's go for some pity. We'll just stick with Squall. Back in these days, you could actually name your characters because they weren't vocalized. because these days all the characters have voice actors and they actually say each other's names. You can't choose your name as such. But back in these days, you could name your characters whatever you wanted. But I'm sticking with the traditional names. Now, as a remake, or a HD remaster as they call it, you can see that the character models are quite crisp. Certainly much better than the character models in terms of the crispness. They're certainly much better than what the original game had. This is contrasted a little bit with the backgrounds because they couldn't crisp up the backgrounds quite as much. So it's a little bit fuzzy on the backgrounds with the clean character models. I'm not a big fan of that look, but it's better in Final Fantasy VIII than it is in the Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy IX ports that you can also get on Switch and PlayStation 4. It's a little bit better melded in this one. I don't know if .emu actually did anything about that or it was just luck, but that's how it's turned out. So Seifer is the name of the other guy, the one that gave Squall the very handsome cut. He's the frenemy of Squall, Seifer and Squall. They hate each other, but secretly they love each other. There's another FMV of the teacher. Lots of folks like the teacher, they does. Mostly because she uses a whip as a weapon and she has those long boots. She's that type of character. Also, not a particularly effective teacher since she knows that these two are a little bit passionate about their bouts and they have a rivalry thing going on and she doesn't really know how to manage it. So, probably not the most by-the-book teacher. But she has a heart of gold for her students. I'm more complex than you think. You are indeed, Squall. You are indeed. So one of the things about this game, which I think really has given it a lot of longevity, is that it is a very dense game. It has a lot of themes going on in it. It was a long game. It was spread across 4 discs on the PlayStation, so it takes a long time to get to its points and makes a lot of points in the process. But there's a lot that you can take out of it. It's quite literary in its approach, and this was, again, Square Enix kind of at its best. Between that, it was producing mainstream stuff, the equivalent of blockbusters back on the PlayStation 1, but it was still doing so with a kind of intelligence that, certainly if you look at Final Fantasy 15, has eased off a little bit. But then again, Final Fantasy VII Remake once again kind of threw a spanner in the works and re-established Square Enix and Final Fantasy as a storytelling genre. So, yeah. Good game, that Final Fantasy VII Remake. You like when she eats things. Oh, Sean. Like hot dogs. That's true. That's true. It was a very Dawson's Creek aesthetic, and the character dynamics were very much in that vein. it was unashamedly youthful, I guess. Final Fantasy VII was a little bit, dour and adult in tone. Even with the spiky hair of Cloud, it was pitched at a different level. This one's more youthy, which was pretty cool. Once we get to Irvine, then we'll see the full Dawson's Creek effect going on. That guy was one smooth cowboy. Irvine and Selphie are canon couple, they are. They're perfect for one another. So there's a nice FMV at the school. Lots of lovely art there. This game straddles a line between science fiction and more traditional fantasy quite nicely. That's a science fiction element in the design of it. But the actual narrative plays throughout a bit like a more traditional fantasy. And certainly a lot of the enemies that you fight are very traditional fantasy. So this is a military school they're all at. They're all future mercenaries in the employ of the actual school. So it's like a military organization and a training organization, but it's a private business. The logistics behind it are interesting. So is the moral and ethical questions that it asks, but we'll get to those. So you have to go on a field exam to pass and become a fully fledged member of the actual military unit. Back on the PlayStation, when the character models were a little bit fuzzier, I always thought that these characters were like wearing shorts, and so when the girls, were wearing shorts, and so when there was a FMV which showed them in skirts, it was always a little bit confusing for me because I assumed that the character models, those were too short to be skirts, but no, they're actual skirts. So interesting dress code for this school. Okay, so we've just, oops, boom. Now that Selphie, we don't really get to know her just yet, but let's be nice to her because she's my favourite. She's a bit of a klutz and a ditz. With a tee-hee and all. Might as well do this tour thing. We have to either way, so might as well be friendly at the process. Okay, so we're about to get a tour of the school. It's a pretty good school. Now, I don't think we'll play that tonight. We just got cards for a card game. It's called Triad, and it is an absolutely brilliant little mini-game side quest thing that Final Fantasy VIII had, and it really set the standards for additional things that you could do beyond the narrative within these Final Fantasy games. It's a great little card game, but we'll probably play that a little bit later on. In saying that, I probably can't resist myself and I'll play a game or two. There's always a big rush for the hot dogs. Yep. So anyway, while we're working through this tutorial thing, are you all excited for the big Ghost of Tsushima review embargo drop in about 2.5 hours? For people on the stream who may be interested, I have a rather large review going up. I ended up writing 5,500 words on it and doing a 17-minute video as well. So I certainly have thoughts about that game, which I'm looking forward to talking to people about. It's the big AAA release, I guess, of this year for people who like games that are not just first-person shooters from the whoever's. But yeah, it'll be an interesting one. I'm looking forward to people's thoughts on that. And that was my plug for please read my review, make it worth my while. I've never written such a long review before. It'll be interesting to see if it actually gets a different response to the usual reviews that I write of 1,000 words or so. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I mean, I can't just talk about it just yet, in case somebody from Sony is actually sitting on the stream incognito and is about to bust me for actually talking about the game ahead of embargo lift. But yeah, I do think that my review has the potential to cause some discourse. Who knows? It is a Sony game, so you can't really say anything with Sony games and not have somebody attack you over it. One way or the other. Okay, so we helped Selfie out there. Now she knows how to get around the garden. What I'm going to quickly do is save the game, just in case I do decide to play a round or two of cards. Because if you lose a game of the card game thing, then you lose a card. So you've got to make sure you win every time. You've got to save spam a little bit. So here we go, Triple Triad. This is a great bit of fun. I do love this one. Collecting all the cards. So you pick 5 cards to put into your hand. At the start, you don't have too much quality. You see they all have numbers, and that will all make sense soon enough. Let's go Fungar, Gala, Gesper, and Catachipilla. Okay, so they're all monsters that are in the game, and now we have to put one card down, and then they put one card down, and then we take turns. The winner is the one that has the most cards that are on their side on the board at the end of a hand, at the end of a round, and you flip cards to your side by pairing the numbers up in a way that's advantageous to you. So let's just show you this in action. We'll move that guy there. And then he puts that there. Now, because 5 on the north beats 4 on the south, he won that. And he therefore gets to flip the card to his side. Now, I can't flip the guess bar back because I haven't got a 6 or above pointing to the left. But I can take the shadow, which I will do with that one. That becomes mine. That becomes his. And you just keep doing this until one person has nothing left. And that's a draw we got. So that is triple triad. Now you need to play quite a lot of that as you go along, because as you win you get to take the cards off the other player, and you kind of need those because you get better and better cards, and then you can play against better and better opponents is the goal of things. Now see, there's a pretty good opportunity for me. I can flip 2 of those by putting that card there. I'm winning both of those. Makes it a bit easier. Unfortunately, he's going to flip another one there, and we get another draw. Anyway, let's just skip on that. I can always come back and play more of that later on. It's not the most riveting contents for a stream. So, we needed to go and meet our instructor out this way. Oops, he wants to play cards too. I lied, I'm going to play one more hand of cards. Now, he's got much better cards. He's got much better cards. Much better. And he's going to win this pretty handily, and then I'm going to have to restart because I don't want to lose my cards. Can't beat this guy yet. But therein is the reason why you need to play lots of cards in Final Fantasy VIII. So he stole my Caterpillar. We'll just take it easy. We'll just restart. That's a bit like getting a game over, really. I have so many fond memories, especially the first time I played this thing through, of restarting so many times to try and get all the cards. I want to go this way. Okay. Anyway, now we're actually going to go out and do the thing. So he doesn't always show up, that guy. He's just sometimes go. He's an opportunity to get some good cards if you have some of your own. Can't do that just yet. We'll get there. Here we go. So this is the main mechanic of the game. It's about using your summons, which are GFs in this. And you basically junction them to your characters, as in equip them. And when you've equipped them, they can boost all of your character's abilities, and you can use a range of different abilities depending on which GF you've got. It seems like a complex system at first, but you do get the hang of it soon enough. I'm not even going to try to explain it. Yeah, I'm not even going to try to explain it. It's too much to bother explaining. Most people who'd be watching this stream would imagine already know about Final Fantasy VIII anyway. Let's equip Shiva to Squall and Magic and Draw and GF. And then let's junction the other one to Christus. Magic and Draw and Item with Christus. Okay. And here we have the Final Fantasy world. It looks primitive by these standards, but back in these days, the promise of this world was pretty amazing. It was huge, it was open, it was pretty. So here we go, we're going to fight a battle. Now you're going to see where this game can become a little bit of a drag at times. We are going to engage in full with the draw system. But first we're going to knock down the number of enemies a little bit, because if there's too many of them it becomes a pain to deal with. That's one down. Get rid of the other one. And then we start drawing. Okay, so here's the main difference in Final Fantasy VIII compared to most other games in this, or the other games. This is a unique thing to this game. You can draw magic out of your opponents. So this opponent has two different ones, and you keep drawing basically until you get to 100 of a maximum of each magic ability. So this can take a while, at least at first. Once you've got a full thing of magic, then you don't need to worry about it anymore, of course. But when the enemies are quite weak and not doing much damage to you, you do want to take the opportunity to draw as much as possible. So we're just going to do this for a little while. You can enjoy the lovely music in the background as we go along. Because Final Fantasy VIII has really lovely music. Truly lovely. Actually, one of actually, it'd have to be my favourite Final Fantasy song of all. Man with the Machine Gun. At least my favourite Final Fantasy battle song of all. That is in this game. And yeah, it's a great piece of music. If you listen to the DDNet podcast often enough, you'll hear that one because I keep putting it on. I love that piece of music so much. I actually heard it in a concert once. It was just a general game music concert as opposed to a specialist Final Fantasy one, and they played that as the song to represent the Final Fantasy series, and that was pretty cool, having a whole orchestra play that game as a song in front of you. Anyway, I've had enough of this. I haven't got them all, but I haven't got all the maximums yet. But I'll just progress, because otherwise it can become a drag. And besides, I'll get I'll get plenty of chances to draw more of these spells soon enough. They're not exactly uncommon bits of magic. There we go. And what I can do now that I actually have some of that stuff, I can go back into the junction. Then go down to that, and by junctioning it to magic, as you can see, you get a boost to that magic, to that statistic. Same deal with here. That gives me a 2-point boost to the magic skill because I've had those scans equipped to it. So it's basically like a second equipment system, only focused on magic that you draw out of your opponents during combat. So we need to go that way. I lost the cave there for a moment. Now we're in the forest, so we have to fight a T-Rex. Let's not do that. Let's get the heck out of here. You don't want to fight those too early. If you run across a T-Rex, then at this point of the game anyway, you're not going to be able to defeat them. They're a little bit tough. So that's the cave we need to get to, but I do want something. I need a little bit more leveling up first. Yeah, that thing will help. So, different spells here. That's the one I need, Blizzard. Because I'm about to go into a fire cave, as you may remember. From the lecture that we just got a little bit ago. We're going to need that. We'll also need cures because we can then actually cast the magic as well once we've drawn it. So it also works as a bit of a alternative to collecting potions, really. I'm not gonna punch the lizard, Daddy. I'm like level 8. I'm not ready for the big lizard. I didn't even have a cure on me. You just like to see chaos, Sean. You just like to see me die. Once you get into a rhythm with this combat system, it's actually not nearly... You do want to see me play Mega Man. You're cruel. Wasn't Shantae enough? Wasn't my absolutely embarrassing effort at Shantae enough for you? Did you see that the original Shantae is getting a physical re-release on the Switch? That was pretty neat. Bit of news. Quite like that. A Game Boy Color game getting a physical release on the Switch. Kind of a waste of the memory that's on the Switch cartridges, but certainly a nice thing for collectors. Oh yeah, that's right, Risky's Revenge as well, yeah. Yeah, it is good to have it all together. It's finally... It's been such a disjointed series, hasn't it? It's been so ad hoc in terms of how they've actually done releases and managed the series. So it's nice to see it finally starting to come together for them after, what, 15 years of... 20 years of development, or however long they've been doing them for. Mind you, after the last one, they probably need a little bit of inspiration if they want to continue it going. The last Shantae was... It was good, but it wasn't... It wasn't the vivid creativity that we're used to with that series. So hopefully the next one, whatever they do, maybe it needs to be something that's not a platformer, as I've said plenty of times before. Maybe it needs to be a JRPG or open world game or just something that's different to give us a different look. Alright, I think I've done enough grinding up of magic bits from this guy. Let's deal with him. And then we get into the cave. This cave is my least favourite bit of Final Fantasy VIII, actually. It has a time limit. I can't stand time limits in games, especially turn-based games. Not that the time limit's in any way a concern in this game. It's in this cave, it's certainly generous enough, but I just don't like it. If it's going to be turn-based, then we don't need time limits. Not a ticking time clock. Okay, so I just need to change this a little bit. Oh, hang on, no. I don't need to. What I do need to do is use some of those cures to get us back in shape. Here we go, into the cave. No, I don't need another lecture. Can we just skip it, please? There we go. I've played this game enough, I don't need the tutorials. Out of the way, creeps. Those guys are in the employment of the garden or the school or whatever you want to call it. They're a bit weird. Don't like them. You're not meant to, of course. That's the point. See, we need to select a time limit. Now, of course, I'm going to pick 40 minutes. I don't need anywhere near 40 minutes to get through this dungeon. But I'm just not bothering with challenging myself. It doesn't actually change anything anyway. Purely optional. I don't even know why they bothered with it. So, some more enemies. We'll take one down. We'll do a little bit more drawing since we've given ourselves all that time limit to work with. Oops, I think I might have killed both of them. Oh well. Not a big deal. So there are those kind of, they work like treasure chests in a way. You can collect some loot from them. In this case, some magic uses. I don't need fire right now, although it does boost my stats. Now that's a bigger group of enemies to deal with. Let's plow through them. We will get rid of all but one of those little bats. This game, for its time, had the most incredible, summons and magic abilities. Like, it doesn't look like much now, to see it now, but they are, when we get to the summons especially, they are really impressive bits of animation for such a really primitive game. They're really impressive. Oh, some thunders. That's a new magic. Squall falls to the ground, jams a straw at the soils. I honestly don't know why nobody actually tried to work with this system again, like, including the indies that do all those retro throwback style JRPGs. This system is not bad. I think it has a worse reputation than it deserves. Sure, at first it's a little bit of a grind, but once you get a couple of hours into the game and you've already got full magic abilities, finding new abilities by actually interacting with the enemies is really neat. And I just don't know why nobody's really worked with it since. I like it. I think it's a great system. Maybe there is a game that does use this system and I just don't know about it, but I've never come across anything like this in the years since, which is usually a sign that it's a system that didn't resonate, and it probably didn't really. It's the reason that this game isn't as well remembered as Final Fantasy VII and IX, but surely there are more than just me as far as fans go for it out there. Yeah, that's true too. This has the Final Fantasy effect, and I think we might have talked about this in the past, Sean. There is this weird effect that Final Fantasy has where when a game releases, especially probably from Final Fantasy VIII onwards, when a game releases, it generally has a really poor reputation. But as time goes on, people decide they reevaluate it. I distinctly remember both Final Fantasy X and Final Fantasy XII, because I was just getting into, you know, online forums and bulletin boards and stuff like that when those games were just coming out, the early era social media. I remember people absolutely hating those games, but when they re-released them recently, the opinion about those games has turned around completely, and it's fascinating. It is really fascinating to me about how, and I actually see it happening with Final Fantasy XIII as well. That game was absolutely hated when it was first released, but now there's a lot of people calling for a re-release of it, and I think if they were to do that, if Square was to put the Final Fantasy XIII trilogy on the Switch or whatever, I think it'd be particularly well remembered, and it would review well. People would love it again. Oops. This is a useful enemy because you can draw just about everything you need from them. Yeah, that's funny because Final Fantasy IX was the one that people absolutely loved on release. It was the exception to the rule of recent Final Fantasy games. When Final Fantasy IX came out, everybody adored that thing. But with time, the reputation of that one's actually declined, if anything, which I think is pretty funny. It's a weird effect that Square Enix has got going on. It's completely different to the Dragon Quest series, where everything just, you know, starts off stratostophic. Excuse my language. It started off so well, and it's never declined since. I don't think there's a single Dragon Quest game that's even not loved, is there? I haven't seen anything bad since it's said about any of the series. About the only thing that people attack Dragon Quest for is the composer being a bit of a nasty sort, and he certainly is, so that's a fair criticism, but the games themselves don't tend to get criticised. Nobody is more miserable than the Final Fantasy fan. You're so right about that. You're definitely right about that. They love just hating everything in their favourite series. I always feel a bit uncomfortable because I'm one of the rare Final Fantasy fans that tend to see the good in just about everything I play from the series. There hasn't been a Final Fantasy game that I haven't enjoyed the first time I played it, really. And then I give the games positive reviews and whatever, and then people yell at me. I'm that guy that gave Final Fantasy 15 a 5 out of 5 review when it released, and I stick by that. I love Final Fantasy 15, though I see it has faults, and people just they were not happy with that review. Look at that lovely lava effect. See, this game really was ahead of its time. That is a really gorgeous bit of animation, very atmospheric. And you can just tell that we're about to fight a boss character. Thanks for joining the stream, Sean. Sorry again about the crashes and stuff. I know we were looking forward to playing Final Fantasy Fire Emblem. We'll see you next time, and hopefully I'll get those issues fixed by the next time as well. And I've got to fight Efreeti now. All by myself, without your help. Without Sean's help, I'm all by myself now. That's right, I think we'll manage it. I don't know where Dithie is. Dithie, are you still out there? I probably put him to sleep by playing Final Fantasy. Sorry I've exposed you to Final Fantasy, Dithie. I'm very sorry about that. Are you Hatsune Miku, are you? What's the song? Something something hiding in your Wi-Fi? That's a great song. If you haven't heard that Miku song before, I definitely recommend checking it out. One of the best. And I believe it was the theme song for one of the Miku American tours or something. It was made for that tour, and it's a good song. It's a bit of pity they haven't stuck with that song, or they haven't put that song into the Future Tone, the rhythm games yet. Don't know why. It's a pretty good song. I just ran around in a circle a bit to do some grinding. One of the characters, I think it's Quistis, is like 1 experience point away from a level up, and I'm about to fight a boss, so just wanted to deal with one more enemy so I can take on the boss with a little bit more robustness in my team. Heaven is sad. I think so. I mean, you're dead, right? A state of eternal bliss, but only because you're dead and probably miserable. They're not about not being alive. If you remember, I mean, do you remember being alive if you're in heaven? If you do, then surely you'd be sad, which would be pretty hellish. So, is heaven really hell? These are all questions I've mused over many years. The logical inconsistencies of the Christian concept of heaven and hell. Here we go. Boss time. Now this is a pretty good boss, because you beat this boss and he joins you, and he's Efreeti, who's an iconic enemy of the Final Fantasy series. And he's a muscular, fire-breathing dude. Great character model. I agree. I wish the embargo would lift. We're 2 hours away now for that lovely review embargo to lift. Put a lot of effort into that one. I'm looking forward to everyone reading it. And yelling at me about it, because I talked about things that aren't related to button pressing, because there's no way you can write 5,500 words about button pressing. So, of course, I've talked about themes. And because you can't talk about themes in the games industry without people yelling at you, I'm going to get yelled at. But that's okay. I wouldn't be a game critic if I wasn't thick-skinned. I'm too busy concentrating on the battle with Efreeti. I've only got 28 minutes left to actually finish it now. Let's show you a summon. So you can summon characters. When you select the summon, you have a countdown before the summon actually does their attack. So that's that blue line you're seeing there on the screen. But it's worth the extra wait before they get another turn. Very much so. Not just a female character, it's a female samurai. And, you know, that means she's tough. Because she's tough, it's very political. Very sexy character for the PlayStation era. Literal leaves in strategic places. Shiva's always been the kind of the sexy character. Efreeti is not happy about me having Shiva on my side. your problem, buddy. You don't like the cold. Get out. I'm missing that reference. Who's Chris? I'm sure I'm about to feel really stupid when you explain it to me, but... So we've just about beat Ifrit. Well within our time limit, but we do have to make our way back as well, so... If I had to pick 10 minutes, I actually would have failed. Because I've spent too long grinding away, so... This is why I hate time limits. I like taking my time with these things. Oh, right. Resident Evil. Honestly, I forget a lot of the references to a lot of the games. I know. It's terrible of me. Also, Chris is the one I haven't played too many of. I remember the women characters in Resident Evil much better. And I also remember... obviously Leon, because he's kind of the more important of the male characters within that series. Chris is what, Resident Evil 1? That was Chris? I'm getting myself very confused now. I'm going to have to go back and play all the Resident Evils. Anyway, on that note, I've beaten the boss. Now Ifrit has joined my party, which means that he's a summon now. And I've got Ifrit's card, so I can use that in the card games, and he's a very powerful card, so I'll make it easier to win. It'll be easier for me to win battles now. Yeah, that's what I thought. Well, see, that's why I don't know Chris so well, because Resident Evil 5 and 6 were both terrible. They were absolutely terrible games. And I'm probably annoyed people by saying that, but they were... I know people like Resident Evil 5 for some reason. I think the multiplayer was pretty good fun. Resident Evil 6, I don't know anybody that likes that game. Resident Evil 7 was alright, but I never got into DLC. So really the only experience I've had with Chris is Resident Evil 1. And I haven't played that for a long time. Of the really classic Resident Evils, I prefer 0 and 2, as in the original 2, not the remake. The remake was good as well, but yeah. So now I've also got Ifrit, so I can also make him join my party. I can actually equip multiple GFs or summons to each character. And now I can also boost my strength by that. So now Squall's going to do more damage in combat. That's how you level up your characters slowly by leveling them up. The traditional Final Fantasy way by just fighting battles, but this is the quicker way to improve the strength of your characters. Yeah, Resident Evil 5 in co-op is good fun if you can just leave your brain at the door and just play it as a button masher. I did enjoy that. I did play it through Resident Evil 5 with a friend on the PS3, and I had a good time with it for that purpose. But as a horror game, let alone a good game, as a horror game, it didn't really do much for me. As an action game, it was only okay. But I haven't played Resident Evil 5 in a really long time. Since the PS3. Resident Evil 7 was, while we're talking about Resident Evil, I guess, while I'm doing this, Resident Evil 7 was actually alright, I thought. I didn't think it was great in the sense that it wasn't, again, it wasn't a great horror game. The series has really lost its ability to do horror. But I guess the reason that I think that is because there's a little bit too much empowerment going on in Resident Evil. You get too much equipment, and even though in theory Resident Evil 7 still had, or did have some limitations to the amount of ammunition you got, and you needed to be conservative with how you used it, it still gave you plenty of the tools that you needed to get through the game via combat. And I don't know, as I think it's become abundantly obvious through all the horror games I've been playing on this stream, I do much prefer the stalker horror genre where you do feel disempowered, and for me that is more a classical approach to horror where you feel like survival is kind of enough, I guess, rather than defeating enemies and empowerment as a lot of the more action-oriented horror games do. Well, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be really interesting what you think of my review of Ghost of Tsushima, because, I mean, we're close enough now. I don't think Sony's going to yell at me if I talk about it in vague terms on a stream, and I don't think anybody Sony's actually watching the stream anyway, so... I have very complex thoughts about Ghost of Tsushima, and the fact that I wrote 5,500 words about it means that there is a lot to talk about with that game. And I think that's a pretty good marker that by AAA standards, by blockbuster standards, it is actually kind of artful. But that's not to say it's an unqualified recommendation in terms of the way that the game does its story. It really depends on what you're looking for, I guess, out of it. Yeah, it would have been nice if you could play as a kunoichi. Kunoichi, for people who don't know, means female ninja. It would have been neat. But the game isn't really about being attractive. They really were trying to sell the Kurosawa angle. And if you watch Kurosawa films, attractiveness is not really a focus point of his with them. Now, whether Ghost of Tsushima does a good job with depicting Kurosawa films is a big part of what my review's about, and I can't really talk about it right now, but that was the intent. So, yeah, definitely attractiveness was not a motivating factor in what they were doing. Probably the best way for me to put it is this way. With Ghost of Tsushima, I was looking for Taiko, the game, with Taiko being my favourite kind of historical fiction novel from Japan. And the fact that I was looking for something that was promising me historical fiction is what really determined the results when I wrote the review. I can't say what that is just now, but pretty much everything that I wrote in my review was against the promise that this game was going to deliver historical fiction. I can't remember the name of the director right now, but I'm waiting for the In the Realm of the Senses, the video game. When somebody does a video game with that aesthetic, then we'll be talking about my kind of thing. I don't know if you've watched In the Realm of the Senses. I would not recommend it to anyone who is under the age of 18, but it's a bit of a masterpiece of Japanese film. Should be watched by more people, I think. If you get the chance to. It's pretty hard to find. If you are in Australia, then you can actually watch it on Canopy, which is the free video watching app that the libraries in this country supply. So you go to your library, you sign up for a library card, you use the library card to log into your Canopy address, into your Canopy account, and then you can watch, I think it's like 20 films per month for free. And they've got a pretty good range. It's more art house stuff because it is the library's catalogue, but in the realm of the censors is on that, and I highly recommend it. Again, if you're over the age of 18, I don't want to be seen recommending that film to anybody younger than that. No, you can't. What? You can't watch the film on Canopy? You can't sign up for Canopy? Is it a by library thing? Because my library is definitely a member of Canopy, so I've got access via that. Actually a big fan of Canopy while we're talking about it. I don't know what it's like overseas. I don't know if it's available to people in other markets around the world, but given that in Australia you've really got the choice between Netflix, Stan, which is a local one, but basically Netflix, and that's it for streaming services. It's nice to have one that has some more art house films on it, which is Canopy. Probably watch more films on that than my paid Netflix subscription, to be honest. Netflix is terrible in this country. Mind you, the Netflix in Australia actually just got Ju-On, the TV series, which I do like. I quite recommend that. I do my best to cover as much visual novel stuff as I realistically can. It's a tough genre to kind of cover because, to be honest, and this is me putting my journalism hat on, even reviews of the biggest visual novels just don't get much traffic. And I do cover them because I have a passion for them myself, and I do them. I write my own VNs, but there is a point where you need to be realistic about this stuff, and I just can't cover everything. When I can cover something like Ghost of Tsushima, end up getting a lot more traffic from it. The good thing is the DDNet website and audience are more partial to visual novels, so I am at the point where if I cover a VN, I'll get more traffic for it than a Call of Duty or something. So I'm able to preference VNs ahead of Call of Duty. But still, when you look at JRPGs, even kind of niche JRPGs from Compile Heart or Nipponichi, that's really where the big audiences are for me. So kind of have to go with them first. No, I can't write just a dozen articles about why Dead or Alive failed. I mean, Dead or Alive as a general rule actually gets pretty good traffic, doesn't matter what I write about it. All the YouTube videos as well, people... What audience Dead or Alive has, I do get a lot of them, but yeah, it's... I do need to be selective about what I cover. Limited resources and time and all that, so I need to try to stretch the reach that DDNet has. Otherwise, I'm writing for a very small audience, and while they may be my core, ultimately the goal is to, you know, be able to push what I'm saying elsewhere as well. It'd be nice if my review of Ghost of Tsushima, for example, got the same traffic as the inevitable IGN one, because I know for a fact that my review of Ghost of Tsushima is going to be a more in-depth and rich take on what Tsushima is offering. I'm 99% sure that I'm probably that I would be the only games journalist that's actually been to the island. So, you know, the goal is obviously to get DDNet to the point where people are reading my reviews when those reviews are appropriate to, you know, when they're looking for reviews on the particular areas that I focus on. Time to cover new mods for fighting games. Yeah, I'm not going down that track. There's already plenty of websites that do that stuff, and I'll leave that to them. The Death Stranding review actually got an awful lot of traffic for me because I did take a different angle to it, and it was an in-depth review. I added a video to it, and I'm kind of hoping that Ghost of Tsushima gets the same kind of attention. That was the kind of AAA game that I want to be known for doing good quality reviews of, even if people don't necessarily agree with them. And I'm really hoping people can respect my review of Ghost of Tsushima, even if they don't agree with it. But yeah, that's those reviews are what I'm trying to build to, where I get attention when I write them, even from perhaps people who aren't regular readers but are looking for the more nuanced take to what IGN offers for my specific niches. I don't often get to review big profile games of the likes of Ghost of Tsushima. Most of them are pretty lousy games, like The Last of Us 2. I say that having given it a 5 out of 5 star review, but everybody knows that I wrote that without looking at the narrative. Yeah, I passed off Days Gone. Even I wasn't going to look at that. I did a preview of Days Gone, and I was like, yeah, this is Sony should be reaching a little bit further than this one. Sony's games do that. I mean, Nintendo's games do as well. There's always a lot to talk about with Nintendo's games. They're not really AAA as such, but they certainly get attention, and they are generally worth talking about. I will have a review for the Paper Mario one up later this week. I quite like it. I can say that in because it's still the preview embargo on that's lifted, so I can say that I quite like what I've played of Origami King so far. It's not a AAA game, but it's high profile enough because it's Nintendo. I don't bother with Microsoft because basically I would not be good at reviewing Microsoft games anyway. I took a crack at reviewing one of the Microsoft what's the name of the shooter series they've got, which is all about cover and setting up, you know, defenses against waves and stuff. Oh, what the heck is the name of that? It's the major one of theirs, and I can't even remember the name of it. I've got a blank right now. What's their major shooter series that's not Halo? Whatever that one is, I took a crack at reviewing that and just realised that it's really not my space. I can't talk about it in a way that it probably deserves. So, yeah, I haven't seen anything from Microsoft for quite a while that I've felt like I should cover. I was a little bit miffed that Microsoft picked up Ninja Theory because Ninja Theory did the rather excellent action game from last generation. About the person suffering mental illness. The Ninja Theory is a really good developer of really kind of artsy stuff, and I was a bit miffed that Microsoft picked them up, and I'll probably have to buy a Microsoft console to play them in the future. But then they announced that their first game under Microsoft is some silly multiplayer shooter thing, so I gave up on them pretty quickly. Custom Made. I did not review Custom Made. Did that even get an English release? Like, not on PC, on console? Because that's the other thing. The bulk of my focus is really on console. It's hard for me to find time for PC reviews beyond a very specific kind of niche of them. Obviously, I felt like I needed to review Persona 4 Golden, for example, on PC, but there's just so many PC games that get released, especially in my space, that if I tried to cover them, I kind of get drowned. in all the releases, because then I would feel like I have to do the visual novels, the pervy anime games, all that stuff is kind of PC only. The good thing about consoles is that there aren't so many releases on there. I know I have to play Flowers. It's a bit beyond the scope to do a review at this stage unless it gets a re-release on console or something, but I am definitely going to play Flowers. But as you know, I've been playing Higurashi for like for 7 or 8 weeks now, and I'm still only at chapter 4 or something, so it takes me a while to work through PC games because I need to focus elsewhere. Anyway, I just realised that I'm still on the stream and I'm talking on and on when I'm meant to be playing Final Fantasy VIII. So, quick recap. We got to the Fire Cave, we beat Ifrit, we got Ifrit to join us. Now we've passed that exam, we're ready to do the next exam, which we've worked towards. And that is the next chapter in Final Fantasy VIII. That's where the narrative really starts to pick up as well. And things do get quite dramatic quite quickly. That is the next thing that you do in this game is a really exciting thing, actually. It's very dramatic and really sets up the tone of the rest of the game. Both in terms of your relationship with Seifa, the broader political environment that this game takes place in, and Squall's character himself. You also get to meet some friends, and the narrative picks up pretty quickly in this one. I want to go this way. Alright, so we're going to save. On that note, it is a bit beyond where I was planning on doing the stream tonight, but given that I had the terrible technical issues at the start, I felt like I had to make it up with some kind of meaningful stream of Final Fantasy VIII. We will be back next week, hopefully back playing the GBA games that I was really enjoying doing on these streams. Hopefully I can get these tech issues sorted. I have no idea what's going on there. Thanks very much for tuning in. I need to go away and get ready for the embargo drop of Ghost of Tsushima. I've still got a whole bunch of things I need to do before that happens. Thanks as always for tuning in. We'll be back later in the week with something else. On Friday night we'll be doing the DDNet After Dark stream. And yes, I will be reviewing some video games. Too many video games. I'm very tired and exhausted, but I plow on. Thanks, Dithy Ram, for joining as always. It's great to have you around to chat with. Have a great week, and I'm sure we'll catch up on Twitter soon enough. See you later.